Imagine discovering that something you believed your entire life was never true. Not a small mistake, a mistake about who you are. For centuries, humanity placed itself at the center of reality, the center of the cosmos, the center of life, the center of reason, the center of meaning. And then, one by one, those certainties began to fall. Not because humanity became less important, but because reality turned out to be far larger than we imagined. Tonight, we explore one of the most profound journeys in human history, the gradual decentering of humanity. A story that begins with the stars and ends with a question that may define our future. What happens when the center disappears? Welcome to The Lantern's Glow.
Before humanity questioned life, before we questioned the mind, before we questioned intelligence itself, we questioned the sky. And for most of human history, the answer seemed obvious. The Earth stood still. The sun rose. The stars moved overhead. Every day appeared to confirm the same story, that we stood at the center of creation.
To be fair, it still feels that way. Walk outside tonight. The ground beneath your feet feels completely motionless. Nothing about your experience suggests you're standing on a planet hurtling through space.
Exactly, which is why the ancient worldview wasn't foolish. It was built from direct human experience, and psychologically, it offered something comforting.
Every star up there is an ancestor watching over us.
Humanity wasn't simply living in the universe. Humanity occupied the center of it.
And honestly, that sounds quite nice.
It does. There is something reassuring about believing reality is organized around you. Individuals do it. Cultures do it. Entire civilizations do it. But reality has a habit of challenging our favorite assumptions. And in 1543, Nicholas Copernicus proposed something extraordinary. The Earth was not the center. The Earth moved.
It's strange, because today that's a fact children learn in school. But at the time, that idea must have felt almost impossible.
Imagine someone telling you that the thing which feels completely stable is actually moving at extraordinary speed through space. Not just you, the entire planet. Suddenly, your senses no longer seem quite so trustworthy.
So the shock wasn't only astronomical, it was personal.
Very much so. And then Galileo pointed a telescope toward the heavens, and the old universe began to crack. The moon wasn't a perfect celestial sphere. It had mountains, craters, shadows. It looked surprisingly familiar. And then Galileo observed 4 moons orbiting Jupiter.
Which sounds like a small detail until you realize what it means. If moons can orbit Jupiter, then not everything revolves around Earth. Galileo also observed Venus changing shape across the sky. Sometimes it appeared as a crescent, sometimes nearly full. Those phases only made sense if Venus was orbiting the Sun. The heavens were not behaving as the old model predicted. All the evidence was beginning to point in only one direction. The Earth was not the center after all.
For centuries, humanity had imagined itself standing at the center of a cosmic stage. Suddenly, there were other centers. And once that idea appeared, it never stopped expanding. The Earth became one planet. The Sun became one star. The Milky Way became one galaxy among billions. Every discovery widened the frame.
It's almost like humanity kept zooming out, and every time we did, we occupied a smaller part of the picture.
Yes, but there is an interesting psychological trap hiding inside that observation. We often assume that being less central means being less important. Yet those are not the same thing.
That's true. A parent isn't the center of their child's universe because they're physically central. They're important because of the relationship.
Precisely. And perhaps humanity had confused centrality with meaning. The universe was not shrinking, it was growing. What felt like a loss was also an expansion.
So humanity lost the center, but gained the cosmos.
Beautifully put. And the implications didn't stop with astronomy. The philosopher Immanuel Kant later suggested that the Copernican revolution contained a deeper lesson. Perhaps reality doesn't simply appear to us exactly as it is. Perhaps the human mind actively participates in shaping experience.
Wait. First we discover we're not at the center of the universe, and then we discover we may not even perceive reality directly.
The wound becomes deeper. Reality is under no obligation to organize itself around human intuition, or human perception, or human comfort.
That's a slightly rude discovery.
Profoundly rude. But also liberating, because every time reality refused to fit inside our assumptions, our understanding became larger. Carl Sagan captured this beautifully. Humanity lost the center of the cosmos, but in return, we discovered a universe filled with galaxies, stars, planets, nebulae, and black holes. A universe billions of years old. A universe far stranger and more magnificent than the one we imagined.
And somehow, within all of that, matter became conscious.
Yes, a small planet orbiting an ordinary star produced beings capable of asking questions about existence itself, not rulers standing above the universe, participants within it.
I think that's the part people often miss. The Copernican revolution sounds like a story about becoming smaller, but it actually feels more like a story about becoming connected to something larger.
The Earth moves, the center falls away, the map grows larger, and humanity takes its first step away from certainty and toward understanding. But even after losing the center of the cosmos, humanity still held on to another comforting belief. Perhaps we were not the center of the universe, but surely we remained separate from the animals. And then Darwin arrived. Even after humanity lost the center of the cosmos, we held on to something enormously comforting, the belief that we stood apart from the rest of life. The universe may not revolve around us, but surely humanity remained different, special, separate.
I think most people still feel that. We look at animals and instinctively think, that's nature. Then we look at ourselves and think, that's something else.
Exactly. For centuries, humanity imagined itself standing above the natural world, not merely another species, but an exception to it. And then Charles Darwin arrived.
The man who ruined everyone's special status.
Quite politely, yes. Because Darwin's theory of evolution did not simply change biology. It changed humanity's understanding of itself. Species were not fixed. Life was not separately created. Over immense spans of time, organisms changed, adapted, diverged, evolved. And humanity was not outside that process.
Which sounds obvious today, but at the time, that must have felt like another center collapsing.
It was. Because Darwin wasn't merely saying that humans resemble animals. He was saying something much deeper. Humans are animals.
That sentence still makes some people uncomfortable.
It does. Because we prefer clean boundaries. Us and them. Humanity and nature. Civilization and wilderness. But evolution blurs those lines. The human body carries traces of its own history. The tailbone, wisdom teeth, ancient biological structures inherited from earlier forms of life. We are, in a sense, living archives.
So my body is basically carrying millions of years of old software.
A remarkable amount of it. And Darwin's deeper point was not that humanity is less impressive than we imagined. It was that life is far more connected than we realized. Every living thing shares a common ancestry stretching back through deep time.
That's actually a very different emotional story. Because at first evolution sounds diminishing, but then it starts sounding like kinship.
And later thinkers push this idea even further. Yuval Noah Harari points out something many people find surprising. For most of human history, we were not dominant. We were not masters of the planet. We were vulnerable creatures trying to survive within larger ecological systems.
So humanity's origin story is less kings of Earth, and more, please don't let that predator notice us.
More or less.
The wolves are closer tonight.
But the fire is strong.
The top of the food chain came much later.
Here by the flames.
And perhaps that history still echoes inside us. Our bodies live in modern civilization. But parts of our nervous system still carry ancient fears. Fear of exclusion. Fear of rejection. Fear of uncertainty.
which explains why a slightly awkward email can ruin an entire afternoon.
An excellent example of evolutionary inheritance, because beneath the technology, beneath the institutions, beneath the civilization, there is still an animal nervous system trying to keep us safe.
That's actually quite humbling. We build skyscrapers, launch satellites, develop artificial intelligence, and then lose sleep because someone didn't reply to a message.
Exactly. And perhaps Darwin's greatest contribution was not reducing humanity, it was reconnecting humanity. The old worldview placed us above life. Evolution places us within it. The same process that produced forests, whales, birds, and coral reefs also produced us.
And somehow, after billions of years, life became capable of wondering where it came from.
Yes, that is the astonishing part. The atoms remained the same. The chemistry became more complex. Cells emerged. Organisms emerged. Nervous systems emerged. Awareness emerged. And eventually, a species appeared that could study evolution itself.
When you say it like that, evolution feels less like a story of competition and more like a story of emergence.
Beautifully put. Because the second humiliation contains a hidden gift. Humanity loses its separation from nature, but gains membership in something much larger, the web of life itself.
So the first humiliation taught us, the universe does not revolve around us. And the second teaches us, life does not belong to us either.
Exactly. We are not visitors standing above nature. We are one expression of it. One thread within a much larger tapestry.
And yet, humanity still held on to one final sanctuary. Even if we shared the body of the animal, surely we still possessed a uniquely rational mind. Surely consciousness itself remained our own.
And that belief would soon face its greatest challenge.
For centuries, humanity imagined itself standing apart, above nature, above the animals, above the living world. But the deeper science looked, the harder those boundaries became to maintain. The Earth became one planet among many. Humanity became one branch on a vast tree of life. And perhaps that is the surprising emotional twist hidden within these discoveries. The story is not becoming smaller, it is becoming connected. The farther we travel into reality, the less isolated we appear.
By the beginning of the 20th century, humanity had already suffered two profound blows. Copernicus removed us from the center of the cosmos. Darwin placed us back inside the animal kingdom. But one final sanctuary remained: the self.
The voice in your head. The feeling that you are in there somewhere, making decisions, steering the ship.
Exactly. Even if the universe wasn't centered on humanity, and even if humanity wasn't separate from nature, surely the conscious self remained in control. Surely reason sat at the center of the mind. And then Sigmund Freud asked a deeply uncomfortable question. What if it doesn't?
That's the part that gets under your skin. Because most of us walk through life assuming we're the author of our thoughts.
Yet experience keeps offering strange clues. You forget a name you know perfectly well.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well.
You react emotionally before understanding why. You make a decision, and only afterwards construct a rational explanation for it.
It just aligns perfectly with my long-term vision.
Or you spend 3 hours arguing online, while telling yourself you're having a calm and objective discussion.
A remarkably modern example. Because Freud believed the conscious self was only part of a much larger psychological landscape, beneath awareness existed desires, fears, memories, conflicts, motivations, forces shaping behavior without fully appearing in consciousness.
So the mind becomes less like a king on a throne and more like a person arriving halfway through a conversation already in progress.
Beautifully put. The conscious self may be influential, but it is not alone. And perhaps that explains something many people recognize intuitively: the feeling of being divided against ourselves. Part of us wants one thing, part of us wants another. Part of us knows what we should do. Part of us ignores that advice completely.
Every January gym membership in human history just nodded in agreement.
Indeed, because Freud challenged one of humanity's deepest assumptions, that reason rules. Instead, he suggested that much of human behavior emerges from forces operating beneath awareness.
Which is both unsettling and weirdly relieving. Because suddenly human beings start making more sense.
History begins to look different. Politics looks different.
I simply don't understand how they can justify this.
Relationships look different. Even the stories we tell ourselves look different. The self becomes less like a machine and more like an ecosystem.
That's an interesting image. Not a thing, a system.
Yes, a dynamic relationship between memory, emotion, instinct, imagination, language, culture, and conscious thought. And as psychology developed, many of Freud's specific ideas were challenged, but the broader insight survived. The mind is deeper than it appears.
Which feels increasingly true the more science investigates it.
Very much so. The neuroscientist Antonio Damasio argued that reason is not detached from emotion. It depends upon it.
Emotions, like motivations, for example, or drives, are action programs.
The old image imagined a rational mind floating above the body. Modern neuroscience paints a different picture. Thought emerges through feeling. Reason emerges through embodiment.
So the deeper we look, the harder it becomes to separate mind from body.
The boundaries keep dissolving. Human beings are not minds trapped inside bodies. We are embodied minds. Living systems. And this brings us to a deeper philosophical challenge. Because once certainty begins collapsing, another question emerges. If the self is not entirely sovereign, then where does meaning come from?
That's where things start becoming existential.
And few thinkers confronted that question more directly than Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche recognized something that still echoes through modern life. If old certainties disappear, human beings become responsible for creating meaning themselves.
Which sounds exciting, right up until you realize it also sounds terrifying.
Because inherited answers are comforting. Creating meaning is harder. It requires responsibility, reflection, choice. And perhaps that is why modern life often feels psychologically fragmented. The old maps have faded, but the new maps remain unfinished.
So the third humiliation isn't really, you're irrational.
No, it's much deeper than that.
It's, you are more mysterious than you imagined.
Beautifully said. The first humiliation made the cosmos strange. The second made life strange. The third made the self strange. And perhaps that is not a loss, because mystery is not the same thing as ignorance. Sometimes, mystery is what remains when reality turns out to be deeper than our assumptions.
And maybe that's the real pattern emerging. Every time humanity loses certainty, it gains depth.
Exactly. Copernicus expanded the universe. Darwin expanded life. Freud expanded the mind. The self is dethroned, but understanding grows. And yet, one final center still remained, because even after all this, humanity continued believing something extraordinary, that intelligence itself belonged uniquely to us, that language, reason, creativity, and symbolic thought formed a boundary separating humanity from everything else. But for the first time in history, that boundary is beginning to blur.
The stories we
Human
share
beings
by this
tell
fire
stories.
are the threads that connect us to those who came before.
We always have.
Listen closely now.
Stories about the world, stories about one another, stories about ourselves. Through those stories we built cultures, nations, religions, civilizations, entire symbolic worlds. But eventually, a strange question begins to emerge.
Collaboration thrives when diversity.
If stories helped create the human
it's about
world,
building shared understanding.
what happens when something else begins participating in that world too? work not as a human, not as an animal, but as something new. Perhaps the next chapter is not ultimately about machines. Perhaps it is about humanity confronting its own reflection.
For thousands of years, humanity defended one final boundary. One final reason to believe we were fundamentally different. Intelligence.
Even after everything else?
Even after everything else. The Earth was no longer the center of the cosmos. Humanity was no longer separate from nature. The conscious self was no longer fully sovereign. Culture and language shaped our perception of reality. And yet, one belief remained remarkably resilient, that intelligence belonged uniquely to us.
Reason, creativity, language, problem solving.
If we adjust the cable tension here, the load distribution evens
The
out.
things we usually point to when someone asks, what makes humans special?
Exactly. And for a very long time, that answer seemed secure. After all, no other species built telescopes. No other species wrote philosophy. No other species composed symphonies. Human intelligence appeared to stand alone. And then, machines began speaking.
It's still strange hearing that sentence.
It is, because for most of human history,
Followed by the stars of the night sky.
language felt inseparable from being human. Language wasn't simply communication, it was memory, knowledge, culture, civilization itself.
And now people casually ask artificial intelligence to explain quantum physics while waiting for coffee.
Which is why many thinkers describe AI as a possible fourth humiliation. Not because machines have suddenly become human, but because intelligence may be larger than we imagined.
That's an important distinction, because most conversations immediately jump to extremes. Either AI will save humanity, or AI will destroy humanity.
And both positions often miss the deeper philosophical question. The issue isn't whether current AI is conscious. That remains deeply contested. The question is much simpler. What happens when something non-human begins performing tasks we once believed belonged exclusively to us?
That's the unsettling part. Not because the machine is necessarily intelligent in the way humans are, but because the boundary suddenly looks less clear.
And history has seen this pattern before. Again and again, humanity created categories that seemed uniquely ours. Then reality expanded beyond them. The center of the cosmos, the kingdom of life, the sovereignty of the self. Now perhaps intelligence itself.
So maybe the emotional shock isn't really about technology. It's about identity.
Because modern civilization places enormous value on intelligence, achievement, knowledge, innovation, productivity. Many people quietly build their sense of self around cognitive ability.
Which means if something else starts performing those abilities, the question becomes, what still makes us valuable?
Exactly. And perhaps that question reveals something important. Because value and intelligence are not necessarily the same thing.
That's interesting. I don't love the people closest to me because they're the smartest.
Nor do most people. We value compassion, trust, humor, wisdom, care, responsibility, the capacity to suffer alongside another person, the capacity to love.
Which raises a strange possibility. What if AI isn't forcing humanity to compete harder? What if it's forcing humanity to think more deeply about what it means to be human?
Beautifully put. Because every previous humiliation eventually expanded reality. And perhaps artificial intelligence expands our understanding of intelligence itself.
Not making humanity smaller, making the category larger.
And perhaps there is another layer to this story. Because unlike previous
This
humiliations,
section here seems to influence the overall accuracy.
this one emerged from humanity itself.
Should balance the equation.
We did not discover AI in nature. We built
we
it.
adjust the attention mechanism here, the loss
Through mathematics,
if we adjust the epsilon constraint here, the derivation simplifies. The
Yeah.
correlation in
Language.
this graph seems to mirror the structural patterns in the Arabic manuscript. If we reroute the
Engineering.
primary pipeline here, we can optimize the data flow to the GPU cluster.
The structural
Science.
integrity holds up to the projected stress.
If we
generations of accumulated knowledge.
So, in a strange way, humanity built the thing now challenging humanity's assumptions.
You see how the
Yes.
coastline changed here. This map
Which makes
shows
this
the
chapter
shoreline
less like a
before
confrontation with an alien intelligence
Influencing the trade routes then.
and more like a confrontation with our own reflection. A mirror held up to the species.
And maybe that's why the conversation feels so emotional, because beneath all the technical debates, people are really asking deeper questions. What is intelligence for? What is wisdom? What kind of future are we creating?
And perhaps wisdom is the crucial distinction. Because intelligence and wisdom have never been the same thing. History demonstrates that repeatedly. Human beings became extraordinarily intelligent, yet intelligence alone did not prevent war, environmental destruction, exploitation, or suffering.
A species can be clever and still be immature.
And perhaps that is where the fourth humiliation points. Not toward human obsolescence, but toward human maturity. Toward recognizing that intelligence is not the highest value. Intelligence matters, but without wisdom, it can become dangerous. Without compassion, it can become destructive. Without responsibility, it can become blind.
So maybe the real question isn't, can machines become intelligent?
This one is
No.
called a running
The deeper question is, can humanity become wise enough to live alongside the intelligences it creates?
That's a much bigger question.
It is. Because perhaps intelligence was never the throne. Perhaps it was always a tool. And perhaps the qualities that matter most were never uniquely human because they were intelligent, but because they were relational. Empathy, responsibility, stewardship, meaning.
Which feels strangely consistent with everything we've explored so far. Every chapter has moved us away from separation and toward connection.
The universe became larger, life became interconnected, the mind became deeper, culture became relational, and now intelligence becomes broader. The center falls away once again, but reality becomes richer.
And that leaves us with one final question. If humanity is not the center of the cosmos, not separate from life, not sovereign within the mind, and not uniquely intelligent, then where does meaning come from?
And how should we live inside a universe that no longer revolves around us? By now, humanity has lost almost every privileged position it once believed it possessed. The Earth is not the center of the cosmos. Human beings are not separate from the rest of life. The conscious self is not fully sovereign. Our identities emerge through stories, cultures, and relationships. And intelligence itself may not belong exclusively to us. At first glance, that sounds like a story of loss.
It does. When you list them all together, it almost feels as though reality has been repeatedly humbling humanity.
Yes, and many people interpret the story exactly that way, as decline, as humiliation, as the collapse of meaning. But perhaps we've been asking the wrong question.
How so?
Because throughout history, humanity repeatedly confused centrality with significance. We assumed that if we were not the center, we must somehow matter less.
And those aren't the same thing.
Not at all. The sun is not the center of the galaxy, yet it matters profoundly to us. A parent is not the center of the world, yet they may be the center of a child's world. Meaning does not require centrality.
That's actually a surprisingly modern lesson. Because so much of modern culture feels obsessed with being noticed, being exceptional, being seen, being at the center.
Yes, and perhaps that instinct runs much deeper than social media.
The planting moon is upon us, my friends.
For thousands of years, humanity searched for meaning through special status.
The soil is ready.
Through superiority.
We should start preparing soon.
Through separation.
The morning brings light to the valley.
Through the belief that we occupied a privileged position within reality. And again, reality invited us into a larger story.
So maybe every humiliation was also an invitation.
Beautifully put. An invitation to expand. Copernicus expanded the cosmos. Darwin expanded life. Freud expanded the mind. Language and culture expanded the self.
He's so cute!
Artificial intelligence may expand our understanding of intelligence itself. Each time the center became smaller, the world became larger.
Which completely changes the emotional tone. Because suddenly this isn't a story about humanity losing. It's a story about humanity growing.
And perhaps growth always feels a little uncomfortable. Children eventually discover they are not the center of the family.
The biggest crab I've ever seen. Wow.
Adults discover they are not the center of the world. Perhaps civilization itself has been undergoing a similar process.
The impact on the existing greenery.
A movement away from species-wide narcissism toward a more relational understanding of existence.
The light on the water is just lovely.
That's a fascinating way to think about it. Not decentering as destruction, decentering as maturity.
Yes, because maturity is not the disappearance of the self. It is the recognition that other realities exist beyond it. Other minds, other lives, other perspectives, other forms of intelligence.
And maybe that's why the story feels strangely hopeful. Because every chapter moved us toward connection.
Copernicus reconnected us to the cosmos. Darwin reconnected us to life. Freud reconnected us to the hidden depths of the mind. Language reconnected us to one another. And artificial intelligence invites us to think more carefully about intelligence itself. The deeper we looked, the less isolated we became.
Which is almost the opposite of where I thought this episode was going.
Most people do, because the word humiliation sounds like loss. But perhaps the deeper pattern is humility. Humility is not self-hatred, it is perspective. The recognition that reality is larger than we are, and that we belong to it.
This walk so much.
Not as observers standing outside it, but as participants within it. The atoms in your body were forged inside ancient stars. The air in your lungs was shaped by living systems billions of years in the making. The language in your mind was carried across countless generations. Even your consciousness emerged through relationship with your body, with other people, with the world itself.
We're glad you're here.
So the isolated self starts looking less real.
Or perhaps less complete. Individuality matters, but it has never existed in isolation. Perhaps that is where meaning has been waiting all along. Not above reality, not outside nature, not in superiority, but in participation, in stewardship, in responsibility, in care.
Then maybe that's what all of this has really been leading toward. Not simply understanding reality,
Look at that light over the ridge.
but learning how to live
Beautiful.
within it.
Just beautiful.
Because every challenge before us, whether ecological, technological, political, or cultural, ultimately asks the same question. Not, what can we do, but what should we do? Because intelligence gives us power, wisdom determines how that power is used.
So after everything we've discovered, what remains?
This, a conscious species, standing inside an ancient universe, capable of awe, capable of reflection, capable of compassion, capable of destruction, but also capable of responsibility. The center falls away, and what remains is relationship, wonder, stewardship, meaning.
Not the dignity of being the center of everything,
but the dignity of understanding that we never were, and choosing to care anyway.
I think that might actually be the more beautiful story.
So do I. All is one.
Every journey changes the traveler. Some change what we know, others change how we see ourselves. Perhaps this journey has done both. Again and again, the center fell away. And each time, our world became larger. Not because we became less important, but because we discovered we were never alone. Part of life, part of history, part of one another. The questions before humanity have not become smaller, they have become clearer.
It's about how everything
Knowledge
together.
gives us possibility, wisdom gives us direction. The future has never belonged to certainty. It has always belonged to those willing to keep learning, to keep wondering, to keep caring. The lantern still burns. Thank you for walking this path with us. This has been the lantern's glow. All is one.